The colony ship Horizon's Dream moved slowly through the dark emptiness of space. It carried 300 people toward a new home on a planet called New Eden. The ship was not fast, but it was safe. Families had sold everything they owned to buy tickets. They dreamed of fresh air, open land, and a future far from the crowded cities of Earth. Among these hopeful travelers was the Brennan family. Samuel Brennan worked as the ship's chief engineer. He was a tall man with tired eyes and hands that knew every pipe and wire on the vessel. His wife Claire was the medical officer, a gentlewoman who had treated everything from broken bones to homesickness during the long journey. Their daughter Lucy was 8 years old, with brown hair that never stayed in place and eyes full of wonder at everything she saw. Lucy loved the ship. She knew every corridor, every hiding spot, every crew member's name. The passengers called her their little explorer. She would sit for hours at the observation windows, watching stars drift past like distant fireflies. She asked questions constantly. Why do stars shine? How far is home? Are there other children where we're going? The trouble began near the Arcanus relay point, a busy crossroads where ships from many worlds pass through. The Horizon's Dream received a signal ordering it to stop for inspection. This was normal. The Galaxy Council controlled this part of space, and they checked human ships regularly. Captain William Porter, a calm man who had made this journey 12 times before, told everyone to remain in their quarters. It would only take an hour, he promised. The Valari ship that approached them was 3 times larger than the UA, Horizon's Dream. The Valari were one of the oldest species in the Council. Tall beings with pale blue skin and eyes that showed no warmth. They had voted against allowing humans into Council space. They believed humans bred too fast, spread too quickly, and showed too little respect for the ancient ways of the galaxy. Admiral Kethos commanded the Valari vessel. He was old even by his species standards, and he had spent centuries watching younger races rise and fall. Humans worried him. In just 200 years, they had gone from a single planet to dozens of colonies. Their population grew while elder races remained stable. Their technology improved at a pace that seemed almost reckless. The Council had decided that humans needed to be reminded of their place. Kethos had received his orders directly from the Inner Circle, the 12 leaders who ruled the galaxy. He did not enjoy what he was about to do, but he understood its necessity. Valari soldiers boarded the Horizon's Dream with weapons drawn. Captain Porter protested. This was not a normal inspection. The soldiers ignored him. They moved through the ship with purpose, checking identification papers, scanning faces against a database. They found Lucy Brennan in the medical bay, helping her mother organize supplies. The girl looked up at the tall aliens without fear. She had never learned to be afraid of things that looked different. The lead soldier pointed at her. This one? Claire stepped in front of her daughter immediately. What do you want with my child? The soldier did not answer. 2 others grabbed Claire and pushed her aside. She screamed and fought, but they were too strong. Samuel heard the commotion from the engine room and ran. He found soldiers dragging his daughter toward the airlock while his wife sobbed on the floor. Samuel. Brennan had never been a violent man. He had spent his life fixing things, building things, making broken machines work again. But when he saw strangers taking his little girl, something changed inside him. He threw himself at the soldiers with his bare hands. They beat him until he stopped moving. Lucy watched her father fall. She watched her mother reach for her with desperate hands. She tried to call out, but fear had stolen her voice. The soldiers carried her onto their ship, and the airlock door closed behind her. The Valari vessel departed without explanation. Captain Porter demanded answers through the communication system. Admiral Kethos responded with a single message. The child will be returned when humanity learns obedience. The Horizon's Dream continued to New Eden, but joy had left the ship. Samuel spent 3 days unconscious in the medical bay. When he woke, Claire was sitting beside him, her eyes red and empty. She had not slept since Lucy was taken. News of the kidnapping reached Earth within days. The story spread across every colony, every station, every human settlement in the galaxy. People who had never met Lucy Brennan felt her absence like a wound. President Catherine Moore received a formal transmission from the Galaxy Council. The message was cold and precise. Humanity had been expanding too aggressively. Human colonies were appearing in sectors that elder races considered their territory. Human merchants were undercutting prices that had remained stable for millennia. Human culture was spreading like a disease, infecting younger species with dangerous ideas about equality and change. The Council demanded that humanity stop all expansion. Beyond the Orion sector, they demanded yearly tribute payments. They demanded that human representatives bow before the inner circle and acknowledge their inferior status. To ensure compliance, they had taken a guarantee. The message included a video. It showed Lucy Brennan in a small cell with metal walls. She sat in the corner, hugging her knees, crying softly. She called for her mother. She asked why no one was coming to help her. President Moore watched the video 7 times. Each time, her expression grew harder. She was 63 years old and had served humanity for 4 decades. She had negotiated with hostile species, managed economic crises, and guided her people through dangers that would have broken weaker leaders. But she had never felt rage like this. She called an emergency. Meeting of her advisors. Generals, admirals, intelligence chiefs, and diplomats gathered in the Situation Room beneath the presidential palace. They watched the video in silence. Some looked away. Others clenched their fists until their knuckles turned white. Options, the president said. Admiral Christopher Blake spoke first. He was the oldest person in the room, a man who had spent his entire life in service. His voice was steady, but his eyes burned. "We can negotiate," he said. "Give them what they want. Get the girl back. Accept our place." "And then?" the president asked. "And then we wait. We build. We grow stronger in secret. And one day, when we're ready, we make them pay for what they've done." The room was silent. Everyone understood what he was really saying. Negotiation was surrender. The Council would never respect humanity again. Other species would see them as weak, as prey. But the alternative was war against an enemy that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. President Moore looked at the frozen image of Lucy Brennan on the screen. A child crying in the dark, waiting for someone to save her. "Find out everything," she said quietly. "Where she is, who's holding her, what they're doing to her. I want to know it all." She stood and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she turned back. "And start building ships. Lots of ships." The room erupted into motion. Orders were given. Plans were made. Across human space, the machinery of war began to turn. Lucy Brennan had been taken to teach humanity fear. She would become the reason they learned something else entirely. Commander Daniel Hayes received his orders on a rainy Tuesday morning. He sat in a small office in Geneva, reading the mission file on his tablet while rain streaked down the windows. The file was thin, just a few pages, but the weight of it pressed down on him like a mountain. Find Lucy Brennan. Learn her condition. Report back. Do not attempt rescue. Hayes had worked in Earth intelligence for 20 years. He had stolen secrets from hostile governments, tracked terrorists across multiple star systems, and once spent 18 months pretending to be a merchant on a Volari trading station. He was good at his job because he understood patience. He knew that rushing got people killed, but this mission was different. This was a child. He assembled his team carefully. Lieutenant Maria Santos was his first choice. She was small, quiet, and could blend into any crowd. She spoke 9 languages and could forge identification documents that fooled even the best scanners. More importantly, she had a daughter back on Earth, a girl about Lucy's age. Hayes knew that would make her careful. Dr. Paul Crawford came next. He was a xenobiologist who had spent years studying alien species. He knew their customs, their body language, their weaknesses. With the right makeup and prosthetics, he could pass for a dozen different races. He was also one of the kindest men Hayes had ever met, which worried him. Kindness could be a liability in this work. The last member was Sergeant Kevin O'Brien. He was a quiet man with gray hair and steady hands. He had spent 15 years operating behind enemy lines during the border conflicts. surviving in places where one mistake meant death. He rarely spoke, but when he did, people listened. Hayes trusted him completely. They left Earth on a cargo ship, posing as traders dealing in rare minerals. Their journey took them through neutral ports where species from across the galaxy mixed freely. They listened to conversations in crowded bars. They paid bribes to information dealers. They followed rumors like hunters tracking prey. The trail was faint at first. The Council had hidden Lucy well. But secrets are hard to keep, especially big ones. Someone always talks. Someone always knows. 3 months into the mission, they found their first real lead. A Corvin merchant, drunk on fermented nectar, mentioned a research facility on Corveth Prime. The Council was studying something there, something they kept very secret. Human, he said. They were studying a human. Corveth Prime was the heart of the Galaxy Council, a massive planet covered in ancient cities and towering government buildings. Getting there was dangerous. Getting inside the research facility would be nearly impossible. Hayes spent 2 weeks planning the infiltration. Crawford would pose as a Valari scientist, using his knowledge of their culture to move through secure areas. Santos would hack into their communication networks and monitor for any mention of their activities. O'Brien would establish escape routes in case everything went wrong. Hayes himself would do the hardest part. He would find Lucy. The facility was beneath the Council's central tower, built into the rock of the planet itself. Security was tight but not perfect. The Valari had ruled for so long that they had grown careless. They could not imagine anyone being bold enough to infiltrate their most sacred ground. Hayes moved through maintenance tunnels, avoiding patrols, disabling cameras, leaving no trace of his passage. It took him 6 hours to reach the lower levels. What he found there would stay with him for the rest of his life. The research area was clean and white, like a hospital. Scientists in pale robes moved between rooms, carrying tablets and speaking in low voices. Hayes planted a tiny camera in a ventilation shaft. Giving him a view of the main laboratory, Lucy Brennan lay on a metal table. She was thin, so thin that Hayes could see her ribs through her hospital gown. Her hair had been cut short. Bandages covered parts of her arms and legs. A Valari scientist stood beside her, adjusting a machine connected to her body by dozens of wires. Hayes watched as the scientist pressed a button. Lucy's body jerked and she screamed. The scientist made notes on his tablet, his face showing no emotion. They were testing her pain response. They wanted to understand how humans experienced suffering. Hayes forced himself to keep watching. He needed evidence. He needed to know everything. Over the next 3 days, he recorded hours of footage. He watched them inject Lucy with chemicals that made her sick. He watched them remove 2 of her fingers to study how humans healed. He watched her cry herself to sleep in a tiny cell, calling for parents who could not hear her. The scientists talked openly in the laboratory, never suspecting they were being observed. Hayes learned that the study had been ordered by the Inner Circle itself. They wanted to understand human biology, human psychology, human limits. If war ever came, they wanted to know exactly how to break humanity. Lucy was their test subject. She was 9 years old now. She had been in this place for over a year. On the 4th day, Hayes nearly broke protocol. He found himself planning a rescue, calculating how many guards he would have to kill, how long it would take to reach her cell. O'Brien found him in their safe house, staring at maps of the facility with tears streaming down his face. "We can't," O'Brien said quietly. "Not yet." "She's just a child," Hayes whispered. "I know. And if we try now, we'll fail. They'll kill her, and they'll kill us, and Earth will never know the truth." Hayes closed his eyes. O'Brien was right. The mission was intelligence, not rescue. They had to get this information home. The Council had to be exposed. The galaxy had to see what they had done. They transmitted everything too. Earth, using a quantum-encrypted channel that could not be traced. Every video, every medical record, every scientist's name went into that transmission. Hayes added a personal note for President Moore. "What they're doing to her is beyond evil. Whatever you decide, I will follow. But if you send us back with ships and soldiers, I will personally burn this facility to the ground." The team escaped Corveth Prime without incident. They returned to Earth as ghosts, leaving no evidence they had ever been there. President Moore watched the footage in her private office. She was alone by her own request. No one else needed to see her cry. When the footage ended, she sat in silence for a long time. Then she dried her eyes, straightened her jacket, and walked to the Situation Room. The United Earth Security Council was already assembled, summoned by emergency order. Generals, admirals, scientists, diplomats, all the people who would decide humanity's fate. They watched the footage together, and the room filled with a terrible silence. President Moore stood at the head of the table. Her voice was calm, but something in her eyes had changed. Something had hardened into steel. "We have a choice," she said. "We can negotiate. We can accept their demands. We can hope they return Lucy alive and trust that they will never do this again." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Or we can show them what happens when someone hurts our children." The vote was unanimous. Not a single voice called for peace. The order went out that night to every shipyard, every research station, every military base in human space. "Prepare for war, Admiral." Christopher Blake had given 40 years of his life to the fleet. He had fought battles in the asteroid belt when he was young, defended colonies against raiders when he was middle-aged, spent his later years training the officers who would replace him. He thought he had seen everything the universe could throw at humanity. Then President Moore showed him the footage of Lucy Brennan. He watched it alone in his quarters aboard the command station orbiting Mars. The station was quiet at night. Just the soft hum of machinery and the distant footsteps of the skeleton crew. Blake sat in darkness, the only light coming from the screen in front of him. He saw a child strapped to a table, screaming as electricity coursed through her small body. He saw alien scientists taking notes as if they were studying an insect. He saw bandages where her fingers used to be. He saw her crying in a cell, begging for her mother. When the footage ended, Blake poured himself a glass of whiskey. Then he poured another. He drank until the bottle was empty. Then he sat staring at the stars through his window until dawn. By morning, he had a plan. The Galaxy Council believed humans were weak. They thought humanity would accept their demands rather than risk war. They were wrong. For 18 months, Earth prepared in secret. The work happened in shipyards hidden in asteroid fields, in research stations buried beneath frozen moons, in factories that ran day and night without rest. Every human colony contributed. Every citizen who learned the truth about Lucy Brennan found a way to help. Blake oversaw the military buildup personally. He traveled constantly, inspecting shipyards, reviewing weapons systems, meeting with commanders. Sleep became a luxury he could not afford. Food was something he ate while reading reports. His staff worried about his health, but he waved them away. There would be time to rest later. The ships they built were different from anything that had come before. Human engineers had studied Council technology for decades, learning its strengths and weaknesses. Now, they used that knowledge to create vessels designed specifically to destroy it. Faster engines, stronger shields. Weapons that could punch through armor the Council believed was invincible. Scientists worked on other projects too. Communication systems that could coordinate attacks across light years in real time, jamming devices that would blind Council sensors. Medical technology that could keep wounded soldiers alive long enough to reach help. Every advantage, no matter how small, was pursued. The Council noticed some of this activity. Their spies reported increased production in human space. But the inner circle dismissed the reports. Humans were emotional creatures, they said. They would bluster and threaten, then accept reality. No young species had ever challenged the Council and survived. They did not understand what they had awoken. Meanwhile, Samuel and Claire Brennan refused to stay quiet. They could not fight, but they could speak. They became the voice of every parent who feared for their children. Every citizen who believed humanity deserved better than servitude. Claire gave speeches in packed auditoriums, her voice raw with grief, but strong with purpose. She told audiences about her daughter, about the videos she had been forced to watch, about the silence from the Council when she begged for mercy. "They took my child to teach us fear," she said in her most famous speech. "Broadcast to every human settlement in the galaxy. They wanted us to kneel. They wanted us to accept our place at the bottom of their order. But they made a mistake. They forgot what humans do when someone threatens our families." Samuel spoke less publicly, but no less effectively. He visited shipyards and factories, shaking hands with workers who were building the fleet that would rescue his daughter. He thanked them personally, one by one, until his voice gave out and his hands were sore from gripping. "Every bolt you tighten, every wire you connect, brings Lucy closer to home," he told them. "She's waiting for us. Don't let her wait alone." Volunteers flooded recruitment centers. Soldiers who had retired returned to service. Scientists who had taken comfortable jobs in private companies came back to government labs. Pilots, engineers, medics. Everyone with skills that could help joined the effort. Admiral Blake assembled the largest fleet in human history. 800 warships, from nimble destroyers to massive carriers. 2,000 support vessels carrying supplies, repair equipment, and medical facilities. 3 million soldiers trained for ground combat in alien environments. He named it Task Force Reckoning. The name was chosen carefully. This was not conquest. This was not expansion. This was justice. The Council maintained defensive fleets around their 12 core worlds. The ancient planets where the ruling species had built their civilizations over millennia. Combined, these fleets numbered over 3,000 vessels, crewed by warriors. From races that had dominated space since before humans discovered fire, on paper, the Council should win easily. They had numbers, experience, and technology refined over thousands of years. But Blake had something they did not: unity of purpose. The Council's fleets were a collection of different species, with their own traditions and rivalries. They had not fought a real war in centuries. Their officers were politicians as much as warriors, more concerned with status than victory. Human forces were different. They had trained together, fought together, bled together. They knew exactly what they were fighting for. Every soldier had seen the footage of Lucy Brennan. Every pilot had her picture on their dashboard. Every Marine had memorized the faces of the scientists who had hurt her. On the day Task Force Reckoning was ready to depart, Admiral Blake addressed his crews. His voice was carried by tight beam transmission to every ship in the fleet, heard by millions of men and women who had volunteered for this mission. "We go not for conquest," he said. "We go not for glory, or territory, or revenge. We go because somewhere out there, a little girl is waiting in the dark. She's been waiting for 2 years, hoping that someone would come for her, hoping that she wasn't forgotten." He paused, letting his words settle. "Today we answer her. Today we show the galaxy what humanity does for its children. Today we bring Lucy home." The fleet departed in waves. Thousands of ships moving in perfect coordination toward destinations spread across Council space. They traveled through back routes and hidden passages, avoiding detection, gathering at assembly points, chosen months in advance. The Council had no idea what was coming. Their spies reported normal activity in human space. Their analysts predicted continued negotiation. Their leaders laughed at the idea that humans would actually fight. They would not be laughing for long. In the research facility beneath Corvette Prime, Lucy Brennan marked another day on the wall of her cell. She had lost count of how many marks there were. She could not remember what her mother's face looked like anymore, or the sound of her father's voice. But she remembered something else. A story her mother used to tell her about a princess locked in a tower in the story. Someone always came to rescue the princess. Lucy pressed her hand against the cold metal wall and whispered into the darkness, "Please, someone come." Far away, across the empty vastness of space, Admiral Blake's fleet was already on its way. The attack came without warning on a quiet morning across 12 worlds. Reality itself seemed to tear open as human ships emerged from slip space. Thousands of vessels appeared simultaneously, their weapons already charging, their crews already at battle stations. The coordination was impossible by Council standards. No species had ever managed to synchronize attacks across such vast distances. Humans had spent 18 months making the impossible possible. Admiral Blake led the assault on Corvette Prime personally. His flagship, the carrier Absolution, was the first human ship to enter the system. Behind him came 200 warships and 500,000 soldiers, the largest single force in the fleet. The Volari defenders had exactly 4 minutes to react before the first missiles struck their orbital platforms. They tried to raise shields, scramble fighters, form defensive lines. They were too slow. Human weapons cut through their formations like fire through dry grass. Blake watched the battle from the Absolution's command center, surrounded by screens showing feeds from across the system. His officers reported enemy ships destroyed, defensive stations falling silent, troop transports moving into position. Everything was proceeding according to plan. But Blake felt no joy. This was not glory. This was punishment. On the surface of Corvette Prime, General Patricia Coleman led the ground assault. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes who had earned every medal on her uniform the hard way. Her soldiers called her grandmother, though never to her face. She had 3 grandchildren back on Earth and had seen Lucy Brennan's footage more times than she could count. The Volari capital was an ancient city of gleaming towers and wide boulevards, built over thousands of years by a species that believed it would rule forever. Coleman's Marines descended on it like a storm. Human soldiers moved through the streets with terrible efficiency. They had studied the city's layout for months, memorizing every intersection, every defensive position, every possible ambush point. Volari warriors who tried to resist were cut down. Those who surrendered were taken prisoner, treated according to the rules of war. Coleman was strict about that. The research facility was their primary objective. Coleman herself led the team that breached its doors, stepping over the bodies of guards who had chosen to fight rather than stand aside. The facility was as clean and white as Hayes had described in his reports. Coleman had read those reports many times, but seeing the place in person was different. The smell of disinfectant could not quite hide something else beneath it. Fear, perhaps, or pain. They found the scientists first. Dr. Crawford had provided detailed files on each one, including photographs and lists of the experiments they had conducted. Some tried to run. Some tried to explain that they were only following orders. Some simply stood frozen, unable to believe that their world had changed so quickly. Coleman gathered them in the main laboratory, the same room where Lucy Brennan had been tortured for 2 years. She looked at their faces one by one, searching for something. Regret, perhaps. Shame. Humanity. She found nothing. "You hurt a child," she said quietly. "You hurt her because you believed no one would stop you. You believed you were untouchable." She gestured to her soldiers. Show them how wrong they were. No scientists left that room alive. The search for Lucy took longer. The facility had many levels, many cells, many secrets. Coleman's teams moved carefully, checking every room, every corner, every shadow. They found other prisoners too, specimens from species the Council had deemed worthy of study. All were freed. Sergeant O'Brien found Lucy. He had volunteered for the extraction team specifically. He had not told anyone why, but Coleman suspected she knew it. He had a niece back home, a girl with brown hair and curious eyes. The resemblance to Lucy Brennan was striking. Lucy was in a cell 3 levels below ground, behind a door that had been designed to contain dangerous subjects. O'Brien cut through it with a plasma torch while 2 medics waited behind him with a stretcher. The cell was small and cold, with no windows and no furniture except a thin mattress on the floor. Lucy sat in the corner, her arms wrapped around her knees, her eyes wide with fear. She had heard the explosions, the gunfire, the screams. She did not know what was happening. O'Brien knelt in front of her slowly, careful not to startle her. He removed his helmet so she could see his face. Human face. Gray hair, kind eyes, gentle smile. "Lucy," he said softly. "Lucy Brennan." She stared at him, trembling. "My name is Kevin. I'm a sergeant in the Earth Defense Force. Your mom and dad sent us to bring you home." Lucy did not move. She had dreamed of rescue so many times. Every time she woke up in the same cell, in the same nightmare that never ended. This felt like another dream. O'Brien reached into his pocket and pulled out a small photograph worn from handling. It showed Samuel and Claire Brennan standing together, smiling at the camera. He had carried it since leaving Earth, a reminder of why they were fighting. "Your parents?" he said, holding out the picture. "They never stopped looking for you. They never stopped fighting. They're waiting for you right now on a ship in orbit. Will you let me take you to them?" Lucy looked at the photograph for a long moment. Then she began to cry. O'Brien picked her up gently, cradling her like she weighed nothing at all. She clung to his neck, sobbing into his shoulder, and he held her tight as he carried her out of the darkness. Across the 12 core worlds, the story was the same. Human forces destroyed military installations, government buildings, defensive platforms. Cities burned. Fleets were annihilated. The Council's power, built over 10,000 years, crumbled in a matter of hours. But Blake had given one order that every commander obeyed without question: protect the innocent. Civilian shelters remained untouched. Hospitals were guarded by human soldiers who turned away any who might do harm. Schools were secured, and teachers were told to keep the children inside until the fighting ended. Coleman found a group of Vellery children hiding in a basement near the research facility. They were terrified, crying for parents who might already be dead. She posted guards to protect them and made sure they had food and water. "We are not them," she told her soldiers. "We destroy those who hurt our children. We do not become what we fight against." The Council broadcast desperate messages asking for mercy, for negotiation, for time. Admiral Blake ignored them all. He transmitted Lucy's footage on every channel instead, in every language, to every world in Council space. "This is what your leaders did," the transmission said. "This is why we have come. This is what happens when you hurt our children." Billions of beings across the galaxy watched in horror. They saw a human child tortured by scientists their governments had protected. They saw the evidence of cruelty committed in their names. Many felt shame. Some felt anger at the leaders who had brought this disaster upon them. By the time the sun set on Corveth Prime, the Galaxy Council had ceased to exist. The Inner Circle was dead or captured. The fleets that had ruled space for millennia were burning wreckage. The 12 core worlds were occupied by human forces that showed no interest in leaving. On the Absolution, Lucy Brennan was reunited with her parents in a small medical bay. Claire saw her daughter and collapsed to her knees, reaching out with shaking hands. Samuel stood beside them, tears streaming down his face, unable to speak. Lucy looked at them for a long moment, searching their faces. Then she ran into her mother's arms and held, unlike she would never let go. The war was over. The reckoning had just begun. The war lasted 3 weeks, from start to finish. When the last Council fleet surrendered and the last stronghold fell, humanity stood victorious over the ashes of an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. Now came the harder question. What to do with that victory, President Catherine? Moore faced pressure from every direction. Generals wanted to establish military bases on the conquered worlds. Business leaders saw opportunities for trade and resource extraction. Some politicians argued that humanity should simply take the Council's place, ruling the galaxy as their predecessors had ruled it. Moore refused all of these suggestions. She stood before the newly formed Galactic Assembly, a gathering of representatives from every species that had lived under Council rule. The meeting was held on Corveth Prime, in the same tower where the Inner Circle had once decided the fate of civilizations. The symbolism was intentional. "Came to rescue a child," Moore said, her voice steady. "We came to punish those who tortured her. We have accomplished both goals. Now we face a choice about what kind of people we want to be." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of beings from 100 different worlds. Some looked at her with fear, others with hope, a few with suspicion, waiting to see if humans would prove as cruel as the masters they had overthrown. "We will not replace the Council," Moore continued. "We will not rule over you as they did. We will not demand tribute or submission or obedience. That is not who we are." She gestured to the empty seats where the Inner Circle had once sat. "This assembly will govern the galaxy with representatives from all species having equal voice. Decisions will be made together, not imposed from above. Justice will be applied fairly, regardless of how old or powerful a species may be. The chamber erupted in murmurs. This was not what anyone had expected. Conquerors did not share power. Victors did not offer equality to the defeated. It went against everything the galaxy had known for millennia. Moore waited for silence before speaking again. But let me be clear about one thing. Humanity will never forget what was done to Lucy Brennan. We will never forgive the cruelty that was inflicted upon her. And if any species, any government, any individual ever harms a human child again, they will face the same consequences that the Council faced. Her voice hardened. Protect our own. That is not a threat. It is a promise. The Assembly voted unanimously to accept the new order. Whether they believed in Moore's vision of equality or simply feared human power, no one opposed her. The Galactic Assembly became the governing body of known space. Humanity took its place as one member among many. But everyone remembered what had happened. Everyone understood the truth that had been written in fire across 12 worlds. Admiral Lake retired shortly after the war ended. He had given everything to the campaign, and his body was showing the strain. He returned to Earth and bought a small farm in Montana, far from cities and politics and the burdens of command. He spent his days walking through fields, watching sunsets, and trying not to think about the things he had seen. Sometimes he succeeded. Often he did not. General Coleman wrote her memoirs, a detailed account of the ground campaign that became required reading at every military academy in human space. She included the story of the Volari children she had protected, the prisoners she had freed, the lines she had refused to cross even in the heat of battle. She wanted future soldiers to understand that victory without honor was not victory at all. Commander Hayes continued his intelligence work. He never spoke publicly about his mission to Corvath Prime, never discussed the days he had spent watching Lucy Brennan's torture through a hidden camera. His file was classified at the highest level, and he preferred it that way. Some things were better left in darkness, but he made sure to visit Lucy every year on the anniversary of her rescue. He never told her about his role in finding her. He simply sat with her family, shared a meal, and reminded himself why he had chosen this life. Sergeant O'Brien received a medal for his service, which he accepted quietly and then put away in a drawer. He kept the photograph of Samuel and Claire Brennan, the one he had shown Lucy in her cell. It reminded him of the best moment of his life, the moment when a terrified child had trusted him enough to let him carry her. To safety, Samuel and Claire Brennan dedicated the rest of their lives to helping others. They established a foundation to support families whose children had been harmed by violence, providing medical care, counseling, and whatever else was needed. They named it the Lucy Brennan Foundation, and it grew to become one of the largest charitable organizations in human space. Lucy herself took longer to heal. The first months after her rescue were difficult. She had nightmares every night, screaming for help that had come too late to prevent her suffering. She flinched at sudden movements. She could not stand to be in small rooms or near anyone who reminded her of the scientists who had hurt her. But slowly, with the love of her parents and the support of doctors who specialized in trauma, she began to recover. The nightmares became less frequent. The flinches faded. She started to laugh again, to ask questions, to look at the stars with wonder instead of fear. On her 12th birthday, she told her parents that she wanted to help people. She wanted to make sure that what happened to her never happened to anyone else. Claire cried when she heard this. Samuel held his daughter tight and told her she could be anything she wanted to be. Lucy grew up to become a diplomat. She studied languages and cultures, learning to understand species that most humans found alien and strange. She served on the Galactic Assembly for 20 years, working to build bridges between peoples who had been enemies for centuries. When asked about her experiences, she rarely spoke in detail. The memories were still painful, even after all those years. But in one interview, when she was 60 years old and thinking about retirement, she offered a reflection that was broadcast across the galaxy. "They wanted to break humanity by breaking me," she said. "They wanted to prove that we were weak, that we could be controlled through fear. They learned differently." She smiled, and there was steel beneath the kindness. "We are not easily broken. We do not abandon our children. and we never, ever forget. The galaxy changed after the war. Species that had competed and fought for millennia began to cooperate. Old rivalries faded as new generations grew up in a different order. Trade flourished. Science advanced. Conflicts still happened, as they always do when intelligent beings share limited space. But they were smaller, shorter, less destructive, and through it all, humanity remained watchful. Their fleets patrolled the borders of civilized space. Their intelligence services monitored threats. Their soldiers trained constantly, preparing for dangers that might never come. Because the lesson of Lucy Brennan had been learned, not just by humanity, but by everyone who watched the 12 core worlds burn. There are lines that should not be crossed. Children should not be used as weapons, and those who harm the innocent will face a reckoning they cannot escape. In a small house on Earth, in the same town where she had been born, Lucy Brennan spent her final years surrounded by family. She had children of her own and grandchildren, and great-grandchildren who called her grandmother Lucy and begged for stories about the stars. She told them many things about the worlds she had visited, about the friends she had made among species with different bodies and different minds, about the importance of kindness and courage and standing up for those who could not stand up for themselves. But she never told them about the cell, never told them about the table and the wires and the scientists with their tablets. Some memories were not meant to be shared. When she died at 93, peaceful and content, she was mourned across the galaxy. Leaders from 100 worlds sent condolences. The Galactic Assembly observed a moment of silence. Ships lowered their flags. Citizens lit candles in windows on planets she had never visited. She was buried beside her parents in a simple ceremony attended by family and close friends. Her gravestone bore a short inscription. Chosen by her eldest daughter, she showed us what it means to endure. And far above, in the endless darkness of space, human ships continued their patrol, watching, waiting, protecting, because that is what humanity does, now and forever.